Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Post-Human Infrastructure number 3. Before I begin today, I wanted to ask, I got into such a deep place of meditation and getting lost that I can't remember how to turn tabs off at the bottom of my computer, you know, where there's those little, like, shows all your apps that are open with like little blue dots underneath them. How do you close them off again? I'm going to screen share. Maybe, well, I don't know if anyone will be able to see because I have music playing and I can't figure out how
You're
to.
on a Mac or PC?
I'm on a Mac.
I think you have to go to them and then close them.
So if I'm on like Safari, then you go to them and go close
Just
tab.
quit it.
Or Lauren, you can click on the right side of the mouse, double click, and or you click one time, and it will this
Got it.
list will pop up, and it says quit.
Got it.
Make
Quit.
it better.
Thank you.
No problem. Did it work?
Yes.
Great.
Got the music off. I was playing Spotify. I think Mary Rose is not with us today. So I wondered, Alex, do you have access to the class definition on speculative ecologies anywhere?
Yes. To read it?
Yes.
Yes. 1 second. Post.
I'll get it for you, Yeva. While she's finding it, Harold, you had a question for me about the Eastern Sierra and the glacial lakes, was it? I think you said before the class was starting, when Rainey and I were talking about about the mushrooms that I use LiDAR on. Was that you?
Well, I'm not sure if you were responding to my question. It cut out for a moment, so just
Yeah.
Were you asking about my question?
Yeah.
Yes, and no, I was curious about your work. Yeah, in the I didn't hear the mushroom or
Oh, well,
mycelium
we were
part.
just talking about those beautiful paintings behind Rainey's background, and she said that was like an older journey, and that she's been looking at taking images of trees using LiDAR, and how that kind of broke the image in an interesting way, if I'm getting that right. And I said that I had explored LiDAR a bit too last year up in the High Sierra when I found a whole field of mushrooms, and I was kind of dancing around them in order to get that 3-dimensional image. And the ground was like, the image was creating this kind of funny picture plane of the ground as I experienced it, because it's glacial, like broken rock and pebbles.
Mm-hmm.
So an unintended consequence of my uneasy, like, you know, movement around the mycelium is that the distortion of the ground actually looked quite correct. You know, and I think it's such an interesting kind of example of this post-human practice, right? Which is both embodied and entangled with technology. Like in order to get that image, you're working with a number of technological advances, not just the telecommunications one, but the way that our hands have access now to a new kind of sensor of the environment, like post-photographic sensor, which allows you to actually take a kind of scan that appears to be optical, but is not. It's not an optical scan. It's a network of almost bounced radar detecting spatial. Rainey, did you want to say?
I said it's a mesh. It captures like essentially, you know, if you've used a 3D application, it creates a mesh model, but not a very accurate one, at least not on the phone. Out in the world, there's too much interference, which is really quite interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so it kind of sort of connects a lot to this idea of spatialization that we're going to talk about this week in the homework that we did to the assignment of Go Get Lost. And it kind of questions so many things about the question of how satellites these days give us an idea of where we are. But of course, that's only true if what we're focusing on is the surface of things at a scale that's so large that it's no longer embodied. So, to think about other than human entanglements requires a different way of sensing, describing, mapping, making, that a lot of the artists that I'll talk about in my lecture today will give us examples of. But I wanted to start, rather than giving a lecture that is an answer, to open an inquiry for you guys about an embodied practice or an embodied journey, yourselves, where you try and describe it and we try and guess. Each of us will share our image and we'll all try and guess where you got lost at, as a kind of introduction to this idea of, getting lost in time and space and discovering post-human infrastructures. But I like to keep patterns in these weeks that passed, and I just wanted to again say how exciting it was to be present at our week last week, where we kind of tackled time in relationship to post-human infrastructure. And so let's begin with Alexandra may be reading the course description for our visiting listener, Izzy. I wanted to introduce Izzy as a visiting listener because every week I think it's really great to have somebody that works with Metabolic Studio and works on these themes listen in on to what we're exploring, just to kind of deepen our interconnectedness. And Izzy is also here today because of the chapter we read, which is chapter 11 from Anna Tsing's book, The Mushroom at the End of the World. Izzy curated Learning and Mending series for Metabolic Studio on Anna Tsing's book, The Mushroom at the End of the World, and chapter 11 was one of their choices. So I thought it would be fun for them to listen also to any discussion we might want to have about both The Mushroom at the End of the World and the text from James Bridle's Ways of Being that we paired for this week. But before we do, Alex, if you can read the class description so Izzy and all of us can remind ourselves of what we're doing together.
Yes. In this online course, we will explore the concept of post-human infrastructure through the construction of speculative ecologies centered around water-based ecozones. We will start by examining the ways in which human infrastructure has impacted these ecozones and identify the challenges they face. Each student will choose a specific ecozone and explore it in depth, asking themselves what their biggest concern for this area is. We will be reading James Bridle Ways of Being and other essays by other authors that focus on water and the underland to provide a theoretical foundation for our exploration. Students will work together in groups to create solutions embedded in speculative ecologies, incorporating insights from their individual research and group discussions. By the end of the course, students will have developed a deep understanding of the complex relationships between human infrastructure and natural systems, They will have developed the skills to imagine and create innovative solutions that prioritize sustainability and the well-being of the ecosystems they inhabit. This course is ideal for those interested in environmental studies, architecture, engineering, or urban planning.
Thank you, Alex. And Alex, would you like to start by sharing any reflections on this week's reading from James Bridle? I know we read the first 19 pages of James Bridle's way of being, and it really sets the stage, I think, for so many different things that we're talking about these complex interfaces and entanglements between the post-human, the technological, and the experience of art practice. But I'll let you sort of start that conversation and then let the rest of you give you all a chance to unpack that reading before we begin our shares this week.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, so this week we read the introduction, More Than Human. In this chapter, Bridle articulates his own lived experience in which he first began to question what intelligence is and who possesses it, concluding that intelligence is not homogeneous, but appears very differently and in endless shapes in other beings and systems. And in this particular chapter, he speaks about one form of intelligence, artificial intelligence, and the point at which it meets the web of life, where human intelligence collaborates with the agency of computational power, and where processes of growth, optimization, and extraction collide with the maintenance of the planet's ecological integrity. And through this reading, we explored why it is important to reshape this definition of intelligence through ecological thought and practices of care and empathy guided by the teachings of the more than human world. And he introduces what he calls this idea of an ecology of technology. In Learning and Mending, we discussed how the author suggests that AI can be programmed to think correlationally with humans and other forms of life, and that technology should be seen as being in our relationships with humans and the environment, and this idea of ecological technology as a way of dismantling the politics of dominance, extraction, and colonialism in favor of a more cooperative and interrelational approach. So that's something kind of like what we read about and where our discussions led in Learning and Mending.
Did y'all read the PDF? Any comments that you'd like to throw out? Especially since we're kind of basing the class on this idea of post-human infrastructure. I'd be really interested in, how this book and how this book pairing with the mycelium at the end of the world, mushroom at the end of the world, is working in your mind.
I think Bridle he's just this incredible synthesizer. He's able to bring in so many different strains to create a cohesive story. And it was super exciting to see Abrams, which is something I read years ago, but woven into this new forward thinking story. And for me, the piece that really struck me was his description of the corporation, which was sort of midway into the introduction. And then later at the end, talking about the potential of technology, but really emphasizing, in my mind, this notion that we need to be designing technology from a different set of values and a different narrative, that is aware of this entanglement and where that potentially can take us if we start from a different point.
Thank you, Rainey.
There was a very brief passage or sentence, passage and sentence that struck me. I am sometimes asked when real AI will arrive, meaning the era of super intelligent machines capable of transcending human abilities and superseding us. When this happens, I often answer, it's already here. It's corporation. And goes on to describe that. And also so there's that. But what I'm struck by is the, it seems exponential amassing and expansion of corporate power in the world. And then coupled with AI, so this emerging network and its destructive capability. And then the emerging, not that it's always, not that it hasn't existed, but in our consciousness and awareness, the emerging network of mycelium and all of its myriad benefits, uses, places, connections. Almost like life-affirming and life-destroying networks arising simultaneously. I'm curious how that's
Yeah, to almost like piggyback off of that, I was really struck by this idea of like the performance of livability, and like this idea of like the social structure of what a corporation does as like money as this way of like, oh, this will help you, like this, you know, like all these ways that corporations just kind of like bulldoze over what they actually do using these systems to just perpetuate this idea of freedom, while really what's being destroyed may be underneath. It's the people, it's the soil, it's like all these things. And like, I don't know, I've been thinking about this idea of like the performance of livability is a way of constructing freedom, and like to actually interrogate that within the body and within the land that we inhabit. It's really like this idea of like what is being sold, like what is being offered and what is being taken. But it's such an interrogation that offers so much like integration of new ideas and integration of new tools of survival. You know, like looking beyond the corporation is looking for what has helped us survive without it, you know. And I'm just like, it really opened up my idea of like this as an assemblage art. Like assemblage art is the tools of survival that we're using to create our own freedom that can't be bought or sold. And like that really like, ooh, helped me feel like more expansive.
That's so beautifully said, Jasmine, and felt, which I really appreciate. Yeah, I think there is a tone as well, in Bridal's work, which is passionate about these things, which I really picked up in what you shared, and also in Tsing's tone. There's something not only passionate, but revelatory, right? That I think the revelation is that endgame capitalism is not the end, because there is a biological entwinement between the infrastructures of capitalist ruin and the web of life. So the post-human infrastructure starts from a point that we only tend as a culture to focus on what we make, not on how it is in a constant state of flux with everything around it all the time, so that we don't get the last word in anything. And so I found that there's a passion in both of those pieces of writing that made me want to pair them together for you both, you know, not to give you too much in this short 7-week class, but to kind of create a strange pontoon between these two voices that normally wouldn't be normally paired together, you know, Bridal and Tsing. But in my mind, there's a lot to explore there. And part of that is tone, and how we as artists also find our tone in the work that we do. And as we move from the first part of this class into the second part of this class, I'll be looking to learn more about your tone in relationship to the post-human and other than human. So I wanted to spend just a few minutes kind of talking about these books, because I'm not just throwing info at you, I'm trying to also throw tone at you as a way of inspiration, if that makes any sense. I think we need to learn to write about our work and talk about our work and inspire people who write about art and culture to learn a new language that involves passion and not just show-offiness about what you know, because that's what gets paid for. We need to be learning to question and discover and regale in the unknown aspects of how to tell these new stories that are emerging. Anybody else want to share about the readings this week? Alex, can you just read your guiding questions again as you wrote them in the chat bar? They're very beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, and I did think of easy when I put in the Ursula Le Guin. Ursula K. Le Guin wrote, "Technology is what we can learn to do," while Bridal asks, what would it mean to build artificial intelligences and other machines that were more like octopuses, more like fungi, or more like forests? What would it mean to us and for us to live among them? And how would doing so bring us closer to the natural world, to the earth which our technology has sundered and sundered us from? How can we reimagine what technology is, what intelligence is beyond human-centric definitions and purposes defined by intentions of growth, optimization, and extraction, as discussed by Bridal in this chapter? What can we learn from the more than human world in this act of reimagination and redefinition? And in this chapter, he very, very briefly mentions the more than human world, but in the next chapter we're reading for next week, we're gonna learn about gibbons and baboons and octopuses. So we can begin to link this idea of what can we learn from the more than human world to rethink our technologies. So this is more like a foundational question to get us to think about it, of what will follow.
Thank you so much. So I also wanted to ask Izzy if you could talk a little bit about the last series in Learning and Mending on speculative fiction. And the reason I'm asking you to do that is that in reading the class definition on speculative ecologies, I wanted to sort of build that bridge between the written word and the kind of ecological networks and how the kind of concept of speculation connects.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I guess I understand speculative fiction to be a genre that a lot of different subgenres live under, like science fiction, horror, fantasy, are all encapsulated underneath speculative fiction. But what makes speculative fiction particularly exciting to me is the condition that it just speculates or imagines or kind of like challenges the framework of what we understand to be possible, or we as in like society as it's constructed through the, capital machine. And so our last Learning and Mending series, we looked at several different speculative fiction short stories, as well as theory writings about speculative fiction, and also thinking about speculative fiction as something that extends beyond like written word. It can also be film, or in this case, technology. There's lots of different forms of speculative fiction. And one of the central figures or thinkers that the course was oriented around was Ursula K. Le Guin, who was quoted today, and who actually came up for me a lot in the Mushroom at the End of the World chapter we read for today, which I haven't read this book in like a year. And so rereading the chapter in preparation for today and just coming out of the speculative fiction course, I was really thinking about what Anna Singh was saying about more like just having non-human protagonists in our stories that we tell. And that was a large focal point of the last Learning and Mending course, where I tried to pick some texts that didn't have just humans as the protagonist. One in particular that comes to mind was an Ursula Le Guin text called The Author of the Acacia Seeds, where Ursula Le Guin tells a tale. It's kind of sarcastic. It has like irony to it, but essentially it's from the author of Therolinguistics, which is a maybe fictional, maybe not, branch of science that studies animal and plant and animal languages. And the story is excerpts from a journal where their linguists are trying to decode messages left by ants in acacia seeds. And it's really fun and clever. And the ants are like actually, revolutionary, and they were like trying to get rid of the queen. And it's a fun tale about language and ants. And we read this in pairing with Donna Haraway's Staying with the Trouble, who is a colleague of Anna Singh. And you'll see a lot of through lines in their thinking. Sorry about the lawnmower. You'll see a lot of things that go between them. And but Donna Haraway wrote a chapter in Staying with the Trouble on this short story by Ursula Le Guin, where she talks about the actual relationships between acacia seeds and ants in real life, and the way that they have a symbiotic relationship and act in conjunction with each other to make landscapes. So I guess all of this kind of ties together, like reading this chapter, thinking about more than human protagonists, thinking about Ursula Le Guin's speculative fiction stories and how speculative fiction allows us the kind of vessel to do that, to tell stories, or to listen to stories even, or to draw stories out of the world around us and push our imagination to extend beyond just like, I don't know, boring stuff. So anyway, sorry, that was kind of a ramble, but I highly recommend reading those two that story in the chapter. I'll put it in the chat because it goes in line with all of this. I think you're muted.
Thank you so much, Izzy. Again, everybody, I wanted to remind you that all of the PDFs for all of Learning and Mending are on the Discord Water Community Power. So if you want to read the curation of science fiction or speculative fictions that Izzy curated, there on Learning and Mending under the title Understories, which was the name of that particular series. And speculative ecology as a concept is slightly different because in a speculative ecology, we're really talking about worlds that could potentially be realized. They're the what if networks. Like what if we shared our water supply in the West with the wild equine? What if that was considered a patchwork ecological network of oases that supported pollinators moving through a radioactive landscape? And what if reparation work was considered a realizable goal, both in terms of ensuring Native people had access to fresh water on these radiated lands that we put their reservations on. And this is where speculative ecologies perhaps differs from speculative fiction, which often is referring to fiction, not truth, whereas a speculative ecology is building on the what ifs this could be different. But they have obviously a connection in the sense that a speculative ecology kind of is a project that you have to talk about in some way in order to communicate it. And inventing that language is often facilitated by reading speculative fiction writers, right? Because they are building worlds in their own way. Ursula K. Le Guin definitely was interested in building parallel universes to our own that we could go to in our mind's eye. And so, in the first class, I talked about the goal of education platforms like this Child of the Pandemic of Nato Thompson's Alternative Art School, which is all online, as also creating a new paradigm for free and open communication that can exist anywhere that there's an internet connection. And so, but I wanted to introduce our other guest listener before we move into your shares today. My friend and colleague, Nance Clem. Welcome to the Alternative Art School, Post-Human Infrastructure. Thanks for joining us. And let's do a kind of popcorn introduction for Nance. I'm Lauren. I'm calling in from Topanga. This is ancestral land of the Chumash along the Pacific Rim. I'm calling from a forest. I go by she, they pronouns. Very happy to share some time with you all today, and I'll pass it to Harold.
Hi, Harold calling in from Kilauea, Kauai, in the Hawaiian archipelago. Original inhabitants and still vibrant and wise inhabitants and guidance by the Hawaiian people. I go by he, him pronouns, and I will pass to Rainey.
Hello, Rainey, calling from San Rafael, California, land of the coast Miwok, and I go by she, her, and I will call on Jasmine.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. I'm calling in from East Hollywood, land of the Tongva people. I will, was there anything else I was supposed to say? I don't think so. Okay, I'm gonna pass it over to Constance.
Hi, I'm Constance, and I'm calling in from the Palomar Mountains, which is the ancestral land of the Cahuilla people, she pronoun, and I will pass it to Yeva.
Hi, I'm Yeva. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Glendale, California, the ancestral land of the Tongva Gabrielino people. And I'm going to pass it on to Jess. Jess, you're muted.
Okay, how's that? I'm Jess. Welcome, Nance. I am in Appalachia, West Virginia, more specifically, part of the Cherokee Nation originally and now. And I go by she, they. And I'm glad you're here today. Oh, who's next? Izzy, please.
Hi, I'm Izzy. My pronouns are they, she. I'm calling in from Wiyot territory. And am I missing anything? I think that's everything. I will pass it on to Alex. Did you go yet?
Hi, I'm Alex. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling from the ancestral land of the Narragansett and Wampanoag people, what is known today as Providence, Rhode Island. And I will pass it on to Rui.
I'm Rui. I am calling from Fortaleza, Brazil. And I use he, him pronouns. Now pass to Nicholas.
Kia koutou. My name is Nicholas. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm calling in from Te Mata Maui, New Zealand. And I'll pass it to Nance.
I'm Nancy. It's the preferred preferred way to spell to pronounce my name, although Lauren has known me for a while, so she is allowed to call me Nance. I use she, they pronouns. I'm calling in from Ho-Chunk territory, Ho-Chunk and Potawatomi territory, in the Great Lakes region. I call on Teresa.
Thank you. My name is Teresa. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. My pronouns are she and they. I'm in Ahone territory. Specifically today, I'm walking along the Iceless Creek bed in little spots in my neighborhood where it comes up as springs.
Welcome.
And thank you.
I think that's everybody. Did everybody introduce themselves? Yes. So we are an eclectic, we're an eclectic group, and we're looking at how we can move towards a final project for this class, which would be a starting point on a project that connects to the class's theme of post-human infrastructure. And today's our third class, and we always invite a guest listener to have an outside, but inside the Metabolic Studios orbit, review of what people are exploring. And this week, what we're going to do is share the maps that you all made from your experience of the homework getting lost. And you'll not use words, but put your screen share and put your image up. And then we're all going to try and guess about where you were and what you saw, and we'll start a conversation in that way. We have 45 minutes. So I'm thinking there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like roughly 12 of us. So if we each took 5 minutes or so on our maps, we could still probably have a bit of a discussion. Who wants to start?
I don't mind starting. My map is just a bit crude, like it's not like pretty or anything. Okay.
Let
Okay.
us be the judge of that.
Okay. So we're not supposed to talk about it at all, because I wrote something about it, but
Oh, why don't you put it up, and then let's look at it, and let's look at it, and then have you read about what you wrote. Is that good?
okay.
Is that comfortable for you?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Can everybody see Jasmine's map? So let's have a few minutes of just quick word feedback. No need to make sentences where the assignment was to go get lost and then make a map about the experience. And what I see, I'll just get the ball rolling right away, is movement. So I feel like there's definitely a lot of movement in this map. And if I were reading this map, I would say that there's also an outside and an inside of a space. So there's like an outside of a kind of elliptical path you're taking and an inside of the elliptical path you're making. And I can see from your use of words that there's also a pool element that looks like it has a vortex involved with it. I'm a big fan of vortexes. And then that gets you, if you follow directly, to a place where there's three kind of interesting star-like or arrow-like spatial spaces in purple. And that feels like they're placeholders for something. I'm not sure what. And then that moves into a garden, and it looks like it's a productive garden. And then it moves towards a place that feels solemn, like a place of memory, a place of remembrance. And there's a rock element in it. So we're kind of going from water through gardens into stone. So there's lots of living systems here, as well as on the outside, there's things surrounding you, like a yurt, maybe a sangha is a kind of structure. I don't know. Anyway, those are my preliminary feedbacks. Does anyone else want to jump in and talk about what they see?
This is Constance, and I see the structures, but also the other beings, the microorganisms that are alive in the soil. I think of Sangha as community, possibly people, but maybe other kinds of community. And then the live plants that are in the garden. Yeah, and the crows that have the rocks to hear them. It's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing this.
I also see this healing journey. I don't know the actual start point and end point, but this space for crash landings of grief and then moving through all these other experiences through the Sangha into the garden. So healing.
Should I go? I can talk. Should I talk? Okay, I'm gonna talk.
Wait, I
No,
just,
okay.
anybody else want to layer anything in before we hear from Jasmine?
My hit was a voyage of the evolution of consciousness, personal and collective, and how that and a correspondence with a movement and a deepening and expansion of relationship with place and non-human species.
Mm.
Okay. Jasmine, thank you for your patience. I just want to, part of the deciphering of these maps is like that collective attempt to understand markings, you know? So I so appreciate you're willing to let us go, and I hope that wasn't too painful.
No, it was fun. It was just different. It was like, whoa. Yeah.
We would love to hear anything that you would like to say or read about what you've written about this.
Yeah, so I went to I did like a solo day meditation retreat thing at this place called Pure Lands in Topanga. It's a meditation center. And so in my work that I'm doing right now, like I'm writing this book about neuropoetics, about this idea for people who are neurodivergent to have like these like ways of embodying language and like thinking with like space, and like meditation and Buddhism as a space to allow your neuropoetics to speak. So when I was making this, one concept in Buddhism that I've been really holding as a way to like kind of like get to this root of neuropoetic is like this concept that is samsara and nirvana are not different, that they're actually the same thing. And that like when you're meditating, you're able to like really feel that they're in the same breath, they're in the same body, so they're in the same jewel. And so I was just thinking about like the inner garden and the outer garden as in the space of the actual meditation center, where like they had this beautiful garden that was very intentional, like plants that are meant to like help with like the eastern part of the body are planted in the east, you know, it was so intentional. And then to go into the mountain where the medicine is not so, it's intentional, but it's not so, it's more of nature's Buddhist way of putting plants places, you know? And so I was like kind of thinking about that as like that, like that structure that we think of as nirvana, but then that wildness, that chaos that we think of samsara, both holding medicine and both holding like these rituals, both holding these ways. And like even the Tibetan teachers who were finding land in California where I'm from, like this, like, and touching Tibetan seeds and like feeling like how my practice as like a Buddhist person, or like as a person who loves the concept of Buddhism, like touching these seeds of a different land and then touching the seeds of my own land and just like that. So that's what I was doing. And like the emotions that were coming up, like I was going for a walk and like I felt like I wanted to lay down and keep walking at the same time. So I just found silence as that space, and like those kind of like words, just kind of like finding the poetics of just like listening to like how land plays on the mind and body in a way that's not like so cut and dry, that allows for play, that allows for eroticism and like bliss, and allows for like this separation between some samsara and nirvana. So that's what I want to do with my mental map, and like use the plants as like a way of like, you know, pink peppercorn grows abundantly, and it's something that is so beautiful in both cultures. And I loved learning that. Like I love learning that like for the people who are stewarding the land, it's like learning, you know, just like thinking about stewarding of land as like an internal garden and external garden that's like always moving within all these other gardens, and just yeah. So blah, but
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, Jasmine. It's a stunning piece of work.
I didn't even read the poem, so that was great. I'm glad that the idea still came out.
Absolutely. Do you want to put the poem in the chat bar so we can look at it? Feel free if you do.
Yeah, I could do that.
Who would like to go next? Wonderful. Thank you, Nicholas.
Do that. Is that working?
Yes. Wow. All right. So give us a couple minutes to look at it. Can you make it any bigger? Yeah, perfect. Would anybody like to start? Again, anything just layering into his drawing?
It feels like a map of a moment of play, like a map of a moment of play. Like, I don't know, like taking a time, like especially the little circle that reminds me of what they do in maps when they're trying to show a certain like geography happening. Like, and I see like, I don't know, like maybe playing with like the toys and like throwing the cars back and forth as a way of like sharing love back and forth.
I love the two hands on the top and bottom of the page reaching towards the center of the page, but not exactly towards each other. So, I mean, there's so much there's so much in that gesture. It reminds me of a map I saw from the early Lewis and Clark expeditions, where I learned that Native people, when navigating the waterways, when they would pass each other in boats, had hand signals that would let each other know a lot about what each other were doing, where they were going, where they were from. So this idea that a map is also an interesting kind of way of communicating intention is interesting to me as well.
I'm struck by the different line qualities and the different sense of emotions. Like the space on the right is sort of more spread out and fluid and more intense on the left, and then more chaotic in the circle that's pulled out. Like somehow they all read as different emotional spaces.
Also interesting to sort of see where land becomes water, because I'm assuming that there's two hills that have a certain topography, where the high point is like there looks like a dotted elliptical kind of bean-shaped top on one side, and it slopes down towards what looks like a peninsula that extends off the land, and it looks like sometimes you can even walk across that to the other side of something. So that's interesting. I was trying to think, it looks like around the edge of the land mass there are lots of lines which might suggest the incredible biodiverse edge conditions between land and water. And then there's some kind of like teeth shape that are coming out of that I'm very intrigued by. Like, I don't know whether I'm way off, but I'll be curious when we finally open this up to hear from y'all. What else do people see?
I'm really enjoying feeling like it is almost like a like we could zoom in, like the overhead of a Google Maps, but then also of the moment. So you get to experience multiple dimensions and scales.
I'm thinking that maybe this is like a seaside or something. Maybe I'm being influenced by some of the words at the bottom, but you know, gray washed, echo, crash, salty, turquoise, cold. And then that part that's blown out that Lauren, you were saying looks like a passage. It reminds me of like being oceanside in Malibu or something when there's a little space when the tide recedes to be able to pass between some rocks to get to the other side. So that's what I was thinking of. And it looks like the lines might be the current or the waves. And that section on this left upper side looks like maybe some kind of vantage point where you could park to see the view or something. I'm interpreting the rectangle with the circles as cars.
I'm struck by my perception of a interplay of like an adult, professional, artisan craft and precise rendering intermixed with like a childlike wonder, almost like father and son, and both existing in the same landscape and journey. And then this is a more random and certainly biased, the somewhat parallel lines strike me as the underside of a humpback whale.
Should I jump in here?
Nicholas, what can you tell us
Yeah.
about the language? Is it a legend for the map where it says flow, support, crinkle? This,
It was a framework tool to catalog my experiences, and the little blobs are rocks that I picked up, and every time I picked up a rock I would record something that I noticed in the immediate area as I walked through the landscape. And it's where the river meets the sea, and it's a pebbly, shoaly slate beach, and it has this amazing, it's really hard to describe and it's really hard to record, but it sounds like millions of fragments of glass constantly breaking as the waves wash over the rocks. And that's that moment that's blowing out. It's the river and the ocean sort of pulling and pushing the same patch of rock, playing with each other.
so each of those words on the bottom connect to a rock that you held in your hand.
Yeah, and that's where the hands came from. I was very conscious of my own interaction, or my own like superimposition of my, putting pen to paper on something that's very fluid and ever changing, trying to draw something. Hence the strong grid too. That's like my, orthographic, which I think the etymology of that is along the lines of like correct lines, which I find fascinating. That maps are very, the way that we create grids and catalogs and numbers of maps, I find really interesting. And that this place changes every day. And like, what I like about it is it puts the slow pace of time into a human scale, because the course of the river changes rapidly, and those dotted kind of bean shapes, those are depressions where the river was just a couple of weeks ago. And then the little kind of teeth marks I guess the sort of the darker band was my path that I took along the shorelines, and those little teeth marks are where the birds were standing. They were all kind of lined up facing each other, like they were about to hit some sort of confrontation or just sort of a solemn procession, like they were witnessing the water passing by, and they're all standing in silence facing each other.
And on the other side with the hand reaching out, is that a plant or a stick?
It was just a piece of weathered driftwood that I found interesting. Like the whole landscape is gray rock, and then the timber that's washed down from the river is also gray, and so from a distance the landscape appears homogeneous, and then when you get up close it has this texture and this richness that when you pick up a rock underneath there's all of this life and clarity.
Thank you so much. It's a beautiful, beautiful map. Such a pleasure to see the line work on it too. I love seeing Jasmine and yours together. This could make a great zine.
Thanks for letting me share.
Such a lovely, lovely work. Who's next?
I can go next.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Mhm. Can you see it?
Yes, magnificent. Okay. Don't tell us anything.
I felt immediately that we were underground and that there were sound waves reverberating from above.
I also see sound waves as well. I see sound and like, I almost feel like I'm on a ledge or something looking out over like something as well, which is interesting. It's like someone's underground, I saw like we're above looking almost, and like the sounds coming, and it's like, I don't know, like we're being able to see an overview of something.
I see like mycelium and like microscopic life and like neural pathways, maybe like rhizomes kind of.
I see trees, both with foliage and perhaps either in fall or winter season or dried out and deceased, and like a dried pond, the bed of a dried pond.
There's a
It's a good
lot of,
place to be drawn to, a place of approach and welcome, the warmer orangey part of the drawing.
I was going to say entanglement, a lot of overlap, a lot of flow, a lot of connection.
I just want to talk about the spatial aspect of this. There's such an interesting way where the washes of watercolor give a sense of water or layered things that have translucency. And so I feel like I'm looking down on something. It's a map that feels like your eye is above something looking down. And I'm getting that because of the heavy ink lines or the darker black watercolor feel to me either like crevices where shadow hits, like, or water lines. But I'm seeing them from above. They could also be still unleafed trees. But since I know where you live, I'm gonna say that's not it because things full spring here. But I'm actually quite fascinated by those 4 green circles and the black box that seem to exist within like that network of cymatic waves, because it also feels to me like where we have spent time together, it feels like the loading dock at the moon. Because I feel like there's some kind of thing that doesn't belong in that living landscape, and that's that dark box somehow. So I feel like maybe the green tanks are like water tanks, and that there's all these living systems around. That's my kind of reading. Anybody else want to layer anything in to this reading? All right, why don't you tell us a little bit?
Okay, that was really that was really fun to hear everyone's ideas and impressions. And it's funny you mentioned the loading dock. It's not the moon because we were supposed to go somewhere we don't go very often, and I'm there every day. So, but now that you mention it, it does remind me of that too. But this is a park in my neighborhood that I don't really ever go to. So I walked over there, and it is like a aerial view of the park. And there are a lot of trees and a lot of roots. So while I was walking, I was just very conscious of all the roots popping out from the soil. And so that's kind of what all those little black lines are. And this space that's like very yellow and orange is actually where the playground is. And so it was just a lot of like kids laughing and screaming and just a lot of joy happening in that area. So this is just kind of my impression of the emotional space that they were occupying, and also just the sound that was emanating from there. And yeah, there are a lot of trees up in the like the edge of the park. The top left edge is like kind of a hill there, so I walked right along the bottom of it, and all the little like orange small circles you see were just like, I kept hearing little birds here and there, so I could never really tell exactly where the sound they were making is coming from, so I just kind of like dispersed it throughout. And then this rectangle here is actually the one big like concrete square space there because it's a basketball court. So I walked past that, and it's just everything else around it's very like green and nature, and so it really stood out to me as I was walking along its edge. And then this top right corner, they're double tennis courts, and so it was just this like pop, pop, pop sound from the tennis balls being hit across. So I tried to sort of capture the sound waves of that. And yeah, some of this like browner area at the lower half, like these streaks of browner, there's kind of a field there, and I noticed a lot of the grass was sort of worn away. There was some dirt going on, and I know that's like a spot where a lot of people play. Like I saw them playing soccer, so it was just like I could see the areas people walk through or what's play, like the areas they play. So sort of the grass had been, you know, taken out in those spots. So, and then the last last thing, this like red at the bottom is where the cars are driving by, and you know, there was like kind of the sound of the cars going, and I kind of made the lines more rigid there because it felt like the man-made sounds. Yeah, that's pretty much most of it.
Just spectacularly beautiful work, Yeva.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, can you tell me again about the bottom band with the kind of terracotta kind of color?
That's where the road is.
Okay.
And, you know, I was just very conscious of the sound of the cars driving by. And there's a stop sign there, that's probably why I went with the red. But, you know, everyone does their California roll and like doesn't actually stop. And so it's just like, you know, slowing down and then all of a sudden like accelerating past. And it's a pretty small neighborhood where this is, but I feel like cars still go pretty fast on this road. So yeah, that was just supposed to be kind of visualizing that area.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll go to keep in line with the painted approach. I can find it. Can you see that?
Yes. Okay.
And I have sound also, but
Yeah, go for it.
go for it.
Yeah, that's totally legit.
If it's gonna play. There we go. Did you lose it?
Yeah, we lost it, but
Okay, hold on. I'll bring it back.
never heard the sound. Is this, we didn't hear anything, so I'm wondering whether you have to enable sound sharing on your Zoom.
Maybe. Let's see if I can figure that out.
When you're clicking the share screen and the little box pops up, there's usually a little check at the bottom of that that says like enable sound sharing or something.
Okay, let's see.
You might have to stop sharing and reshare to see it.
So, sorry, on the share button.
So when you click share screen, you know how that box
Got
pops
it. I
up?
see it. Yep.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yeah, but now the image is smaller.
All right, I turned the sound off. You got it.
I'm intrigued by the what looks like branches that have something woven through them. I like that counterposed with the very fluid green and blue shapes.
I'm really interested in the red line with the green and the blue dots. It feels like it's a waterway, some kind of river, and it's directional. And I'm kind of reading the green and blue dot as places of like movement, like you began one place and ended in another, but the movement of the water that I'm reading goes farther than where you moved. And that's what that kind of red line suggests. And I'm sort of assuming that the blue line is where that river empties, like a delta of some kind. So that's my reading. And I see these as images and expressions of memories of things you saw along the way. But I'm also thinking it's possible you did them as you walked and then put them together later as a series. So there's a sense of almost like a series of memories of special spots along the way.
I also was thinking a lot about the red line and the dot, the blue and green dot, and see the green dot as like where maybe you were when the map was recorded. And so showing like a passageway or something unfolding, that like a moment in like an unfolding or something, and all of the paintings are maybe different snippet, or the little boxes are different snippets from along the way, but that I like what this map suggests, or what I'm interpreting from the maps is that there's like something that will continue and something that has happened. And so there's kind of like an extension beyond the edges of the map, but the green dot is like where you're placed in it at that moment.
As someone who hikes and uses the app All Trails, to me, this red line and the dots look like an All Trails, trail path map. And so it looks like maybe the blue was the trailhead, and then the green is where you were when you took the screenshot or something. And then I agree with Izzy. It looks like maybe the green dot is where you were when you recorded these impressions. And I'm getting a lot of like textural things too, like the bark of the trees and maybe the rocks or the stone like in the bottom right corner, and just like impressions of the landscape in general. And I thought the sound of the water was really lovely.
I also feel time passing in your drawings. Like there's the sense of movement of things, movement of water, movement of light, impression. I really appreciate that sense of the ephemeral that the sketches provide, like flickers of in your mind's eye of the embodied experience you had in this space.
I
I was
notice,
feeling that too.
please go ahead.
Off of what Lauren said, the flickering, my eye is so used to seeing that little green dot kind of pulsing, like as my location on my phone. So it's almost like when I look at the screen, I feel this pulsing energy, and it moves into the images of the water I'm imagining, the pulsing and the moving of the water.
I notice, I'm reminded of the dots on the perhaps pathway, how often in analog form they're a declaration of where we are as a viewer of a map or placard, and I appreciate that I perceive it as a declaration of where you are, not where someone is telling you you are, and how both each image is unique and individual, a different place, a different scene, and yet the similarities of textures, of forms, and that confluence of individuality, but also interconnectedness and a replication of pattern and material.
Rainey, how are we doing?
You're doing great. So totally busted. It is all trails. But the thing that I've always wanted to do with it is not use it as a navigational device, but as a recording of where I'm moving in space. So that's what this is doing. I went to a place, the initial part of which I know very well, and then there was a trail that I've never taken that has been calling to me. So I was like, this is the moment. I have an excuse. But the thing about Northern California right now is that it is transformed to be almost unrecognizable by the amount of water. So I went off to the left where I usually go right and was greeted by this series of waterfalls that were totally unexpected. And the wildflowers are crazy. It was this experience of like being flooded by so much like fertility and this land that had been so dry and was finally feeling this like exuberance and exhilaration of being quenched and just wet. And these are all just very, very quick little paintings that I did along the way. So they actually happened en route at different points. And it's a lot of the trees and very quick reflections of water and waterfalls, light on the trail, in no particular order, actually, the way that they're placed on the slide. And yeah, just an incredible amount going on out there right now.
Such a good way to think about potential project is a documentation in getting lost in this unusual spring and summer as these snows melt. So just as we start to move towards our final projects, I just want to again bring in yet another kind of temporal element in this work, which is how an off the chart year of water in California plays itself out through the summer months as a kind of getting lost series. I'm not doing your work for you, but I'm just inspired by your story, and again kind of like suggesting how we listen to these things as we move forward in the class towards projects. Who's next? Thank you so much.
I can go next. I'll share my screen.
I see like organisms coming into itself. You know, how like that chaotic energy that happens when an organism just is becoming more of itself, like the letting go, the coming in. I see that as like an energy of the map.
I just wanted to say with everything I've seen so far, the amount of increased sensuality in map making when you don't know, when you're getting lost in a place, sound, textures, movements, they're completely different and they're completely amplified in this experience of lostness. And that's what I've been seeing through this. And it's been really deeply satisfying.
I get the sense of like seeds kind of busting out.
On the left, it feels quite festive. In the middle drawing, it feels a little bit more solemn and productive.
For some reason, I also feel that this is one of the getting lost stories where actually you might have been sitting still and looking deeper at something rather than moving, and just possibly something I get from this. And I kind of see like a micro macro thing going on. So I feel like there's an ambiguity about scale also. Like it could be that you're looking at something minuscule or something like an ecozone at the same time. So I'm kind of reading like the right hand gestural drawing as, again, a river ripping through a forest, for example, from the air. And then I'm imagining the middle drawing as looking deep at something in the ground and seeing its connection in almost like that watercolor layering thing that Yeva had going on, like, you know, the yellow line being above and the stain or the circles being below and the tendrils being almost like mycorrhizal networks or some kind of networks, like moss networks, moving one into the next. And then I see the one on the left, almost like an intermediate scale, almost like there's some kind of pond or water retention basin surrounded by you know, the dense edge condition things and all of the kind of interdependent networks in them. So I'm feeling a sense of scale and sectional scale and perceptual scale in this collage of 3 drawings.
It weirdly reminds me of Hilma af Klint, and she has this particular series about different stages of life, like childhood, adulthood, or childhood, like infancy, childhood, teenagehood, adulthood, and then elder life, and then death. And I think there's something about this that has a temporal sense too, for almost like stages of something. And like, yeah, like the temporal chaos and degrees of like development in something's like unraveling.
I also saw this in the middle, the central image, the trans or the the simultaneous interplay of a single cell organism and then a network, super complex network, mycelium, water, combination, energy. And I was really struck by the right image of, was called to consider the form of puffy cotton and lint and these very highly complex and not easily describable forms that exist in nature and usually aren't the subject of contemplation. So I really appreciate that, and that has my neurons firing.
What we're also talking about reminds me so much of, I don't know if I'm allowed to bring astrology into this, but this reminds me so much of Gemini. Like Gemini is that sign of like play between light and dark, that like the erasing, the letting in, the tangles, like it's all about like what is taken away, what is given in, like that, like light and dark as doing this motion over and over, and that as creating a personality, or like as creating like a structure of being, like the motion. And like I feel like that really, this is very Venus and Gemini for me.
I like that you brought up the interplanetary connection, Jasmine, because I also feel like these drawings kind of have an aura about them that I think is something that I often feel when I'm looking at the stars, or the night sky, where the light and dust that you see mixed in with the planetary creates its own field. And I connect with that comment a lot with these.
I'm also reminded of when the Milky Way is visible.
We were first sharing it and it was smaller. Like my first impression of the part on the left was like, I thought it was a pine cone, and I thought in the middle it looked like cells like dividing or something. And then when you made it bigger, I started thinking about it as a map more. And I was wondering if like this green square in the middle is like a park space. So I'm interpreting it two ways, either like an overall map of a space or like more of a triptych of three different impressions. And then on the left, it seems like there's a lot of chaos, and it reminds me of maybe some kind of town square or something, or just like a space where there's a lot of commotion going on, a lot of people walking through, a lot of different like sound waves coming from people. There's like a chaotic place, and then in the green space, maybe more of a quiet contemplative space you were in. And now I can't help but interpret it as like trees or some kind of nature, that's why there's like roots or branches or something. And I'm still not sure about the one on the right, but it's really interesting.
How are we doing, Alex?
Good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know why I'm hearing myself in my head. Let me close this in. Maybe now it's better. Yeah, I solved it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, this is a map of so recently have a 10 by 10 garden plot 2 minutes away from where I live, and I didn't I got lost in stillness, not in a new place necessarily, but like Lauren mentioned, I was sitting still in a spot in the garden and just observing the white cabbage butterfly flying over the plot. The bumblebees, I've seen a morning clock, which I've never seen before. I learned that it hibernates it hibernates over winter in the bark of trees and leaves and wherever it finds a home. And I was thinking a lot based on Anat Singh's book about webs of coordination and umvelts, and yeah, like how, you know, the flight patterns and the movements and how they like interlock with each other over this one piece of over the garden. And the first drawing and the third drawing were done in the same day, and then in the third and another day I went back and I was thinking again about the umwelt and bubbles and how each organism's bubble kind of branches into each other. So yeah, I would say my main theme here is, and I was also thinking about the abundance of spring, and I think I'm in a phase right now where I'm trying to name each other than human world that I'm seeing. So I need to know the names and I need to know how it moves through the web of life and how, yeah, these webs of coordination and coordination of umwelts. So I think that's what I was, what you're seeing here. And I was also responding to the energy of place. So I was just like gesturing on my iPad, just and being very still. Yeah, thank you so much for all of your feedback.
Just beautiful, beautiful work.
Thank you so much.
It's interesting when you get to know somebody too. I could start to read into your notes because getting to know you better since this is our second class together, how much more I could kind of see and I can see that. Who's next? Oh my God, I hear myself.
I would love to go next. Thank you. And I also want to ask pardon for being so late. And I feel sad I missed a lot. And I'm glad I'm here. It's good.
I feel like I see a methodology of movement of material into object, like the sea glass becoming the glass for a picnic almost, like you can see the motion, but also the other things that are made, like the islands, the waves. It's just about like orientation to sight of what's made from water.
I like seeing the sea's movement as a maker of sea glass. So it's sort of interesting seeing bottles on a space of white, which I kind of read as a place that's not in water. And then I see sea glass floating almost like an island in the paper, or a special edition of kind of things that might end up as a human contribution to the ocean, or because the ocean is a sink of everything that moves from land into the lowest point. And the idea that you're then finding sea glass that's kind of like the memory. You're both finding and potentially leaving sea glass that you've touched in this place that you've gotten lost. And the idea of green is also very present in this drawing. So I'm interested in the le sable vert, the green. I'm not sure what sable is, but I know vert is green. So you've written green, and then the sea glass is green, and the leaves of the trees are green, and the sea grass is green. So green is a really interesting feature that's both man-made from fire and sand and silica. So it's also like an alchemy, that there's an alchemy going on in this. I'm feeling an alchemy going on in this getting lost image.
I think in this image, I'm like wondering where she is, in the sense that it's so much more, it feels more about like a process, that I'm wondering where the viewer, where Mary is in this, because it feels so blown out into something more environmental. So this is I keep on trying to place Mary someplace.
I guess because there's words in French and English, I think of her being in an imaginary Mediterranean seascape, or also maybe Californian as well, where she had a picnic on this little area that juts out. And then the thinking about the bottles, which she's hopefully not leaving, but if she does leave, they go over into to become the speckledy part on the right side. And then where the sea glass is being created with the movement of the water. And then we see the little bits of sea glass that she sees blown up.
I wonder if in a way it's almost like reflection also on pollution and how these glasses might end on the bottom of the water. It also, the sea glass to me also makes me think of diatoms, because diatoms are also made of silica, of glass.
This map makes me think of the Anna Singh chapter, and how it's kind of like, if I don't know, I see this as the sea glass to the glass there, the glass to the sea glass is like almost a story of a protagonist that is non-human, and the story of a landscape and its different pieces, and I actually don't see like it doesn't feel like there's a real human center point here, just besides the glass that's obviously like the bottles and the little house in the corner.
What I noticed is a confluence of two perspectives, the primary one being the non-human environmental landscape and its own, and human forms, human ideas, human places aren't imposed, and we're able to see where people have picnicked or the previous and current recycling of human-made glass only on these privileged zoom-in perspectives. And I also appreciate it looks like the sort of ghosts under the water, the bottles, before they're formed into sea glass. And maybe that's sea glass or a volcano underneath.
How are we doing, Mary Rose? Are we getting close? Tell it. First of all, the cyborg thing of seeing the same color in the wall and the background is like blending the map and the color of the landscape. So
Thank you so much, everyone, for the reflections. And yeah, I am still in France, and this it had started as one place in Antibes. If you see on the right side, closer to like the little building, there was a pebble beach. And when I first arrived, this was my chosen place to get lost at. And as I was getting lost, I kept finding all of this sea glass. And it's kind of a story of my childhood, of my mom like working with sea glass. And so I was so drawn to it, and I kept collecting it until I had like a little bag full. And then when I walked to the market in Antibes, there's this little shop, and it's called the Sable Vert, and that means the green sand. And it's a woman, her name is Joy, and she makes jewelry out of the sea glass that she finds all over the Pebble Beach. And I thought that would be the end of the story. I was like, oh, how interesting. And then I was taken to the left side of the map, where there is called Le Cap, it's like a cape, and of Antibes. And it's very rocky, but it also has these amazing trees that are growing roots out of the rocks. And it's kind of had like a lot of graffiti, and it's obvious that people picnic there. They have little campfires, remains, and I was finding broken Perrier bottles everywhere. And when I compared the quality of the sea glass I was finding from the other side of the coast or of the beach, I realized what I was searching for was like the soft, smooth glass, and this other glass was shards and broken, and it wasn't like, I wouldn't want to harvest it or pick it up or collect it or put it in a shop like the Sable Vert. And that helped me realize the movement of the ocean, which is the lines that were like, instead of, thinking about the land, I was actually realizing that the ocean was moving all of this glass from one side of the cape to the other. And it was the action of the water against the rock that was actually grinding it down to be something desirable for us humans to profit from and make jewelry out of. I was so fascinated by this, how I was kind of guided by this little piece of green sand to see how the ocean was making art out of human pieces that we were making out of nature, out of sand. So it was like this relationship that I became very hyper aware of how we're making and the ocean's making, and it just goes on and on and on. And we're deciding what and where is valuable. And the ocean just keeps doing what it does. So.
Beautiful work, Mary Rose. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
What a beautiful thing to be doing too, working with watercolor there. Who's next?
I can try. I'm on my phone. I've never shared screen from my phone, but I'll give it a try.
Perfect.
This reminds me of like getting lost in the familiar again, like some place that you see every day, but finding the little things that maybe you hadn't noticed as where to get lost. Like, I don't know, like maybe looking at the treehouse every day, but not noticing the growth that's happening in that little zone on the wood there. So maybe like a map of like new visions of an old place.
I'm very struck by the white border with the white border around the kind of fairy tale kind of landscape image, and then that diagonal to a corner where there's like some kind of image. I'm not sure. It's kind of looks like kind of almost food, like jelly or gummy bears that white line is running through. And how it defines the image, which has this pink lined paper that's kind of floating in yet another image that's in the background. So again, there's these like this layers of grids and meanings, which kind of remind me again of these complex entanglements that we're talking about between nature and technology, like this image, like the meta of this, like you're on your iPhone and you're screen sharing digitally on a satellite an image that's made by some kind of program you've used to combine a photographic image, or it could be an AI generated image too, for all I know. Like that's such a fantasy landscape. It's possible that's even a prompt. I don't know. So it's again, there's that really interesting choice that you're making to combine the hand-drawn note and the image and a grid. So it's leaving me with lots of curious questions to decipher.
Well, and then the map itself is emphasized by the horizontal lines on the paper, which is also kind of mapping the layers that it's describing, from the top being the treehouse down to the taproot.
I appreciate that we have a house and beds and homes for people and plants.
I wonder whose roots are those? Is it the apple? That's something I'm trying to understand from the map. And it looks like a door between lemon and beds, which could be the door from the image. Maybe we can see a part of the tree in the left corner.
What I notice are two ordinary objects that have extraordinary qualities. There's lined paper, and yet it has this pink tint, which I've never seen before, and elevates it to something almost magical and wondrous. And then treehouse, and there's I see a castle, and I see mythic proportions and non-ordinary archetypes. A very special, magical place.
I want to just build on the magical here and talk about that this seems like a nurturing and magical place that we found ourselves mapping here, and it feels like there's intention setting. So, you know, it feels like things that are in pink are related to what may be surrounding the treehouse. So on the pink map where it says treehouse, maybe there's some intention about what underpins and supports and surrounds the magical space. It's an enchantment map, I think. How are we doing?
Amazing. It's a real place, and it maybe is enchanted. I live on a set of streets that go by alphabet, so I'm on F, and this is actually the end of the E street near me, Edna Street. Actually, it's not the end, it's a block of Edna Street. Another mom told me about this. It's a block of the city street that's been blocked off by a couple of yards, and then now an empty lot. And the treehouse is on one of the properties, and it's actually quite broken down, but it is sort of magical and secret gardenish. We haven't been able to get that far back on the property in years and years. I've been putting seeds on this property for about a year. And I got really into the root structure of a type of fennel that the common name is dog fennel. It's not kind of the Florence fennel that we chop up on salads and that grows a little bit above ground. Both are allelopathic. They inhibit germination. And I've been really getting into how these fennel bulbs they're making it really difficult to add any native plants, or even I've tried some non-natives too that play well with others, just to kind of try to get some nitrogen into the soil. The fennel takes a lot of nutrient out, and it has a very long, deep network of roots, a taproot, and the fennel bulbs themselves on these type will be underground, unlike the Florence fennel that kind of most of its structure is outside. And as we've worked the property, we've found evidence that there was a garden there before. There's garden beds. I found 2 water sources. I don't know where they're metered. That's sort of the next question. But it's hopefully a community garden in the works. And yes, AI did help a little bit. I used just a picture collage program to put together my drawings of the soil and the existing plants that I can identify, and the treehouse structure in the back, which unfortunately it's very old and it's no longer safe. And it also kind of, the excuse to not open up the space before was like, oh, it's this person's backyard, their kids use it, but it's completely overgrown and unsafe for kids to play on now, but still magical looking.
Teresa, wonderful work. Thank you so much for sharing. And it worked perfect on your iPhone. Totally clear. I like the idea that we could take walks and be outside and share in a classroom situation. Wonderful. Who's next?
I just wanted to say, forgive me.
Yes.
I've stayed a lot longer than I had it agreed to, and I have so much work to do because we have this crazy weather. We have June weather. It's usually 40 degrees and all my trees are breaking bud and I need to jump back into the field.
Nancy, thank you so much. I just wanted to tell everybody, I put a link in our class chat bar, but can you talk 2 seconds about your residency there?
Oh, sure. I run a residency in spring and fall seasons, not the requisite summer season, because I want people to see the edges of a northern landscape and how things emerge and how things get assumed into the soil. It's really an opportunity to come on to land that is not a farm, although you do see a barn here. It's a opportunity to work with materials and place, woodland, prairie. The pond is rocking with chorus frogs right now. Yeah, so I have to get back. I have like hundreds of trees I have to get in the ground before 7 o'clock tonight. It's just crazy. The size of pencils, so I can do it. So I need to go, and it's been, I would love to see all your work. It's just like, what a gift. Thank you so much, Lauren, for inviting me. Thank you for everyone for sharing. And I'm sorry I don't get to see everyone's work.
The residency is called Chop Wood, Carry Water, and the applications for the first group end this week. And she takes 5 people at a time.
Yeah.
And it'll be a life-changing experience. So I wanted you to meet each other. Nancy, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, so lovely. Bye.
Who's next?
I think, oh, you can go, Harold.
No, you want to go?
You also did like a painting or a drawing?
No.
No?
Different.
Okay.
What about you? Please.
I did a digital version. I think I got a little bit lost with the assignment and did the first part of getting lost. And the actual map, like cartographic map, wasn't part of my action. So what I did was making a few images, and also wrote a short text. Maybe I can share the text, paste it here, and you have the time to read in silence while I present the images in silence.
Sorry, could we just can you not show us the text?
Okay.
Because part of what the assignment is us deciphering or looking at the images and just developing a bit of a class sensitivity about how we read and share together.
Okay,
And then I'd love to see the text afterwards, but if it's possible at first, just,
nice.
yeah.
Just the images.
Yeah.
Okay, so try to share now. Just a second. Maybe the computer is crashing. Yeah. Oops. Just a second. I'll try again. If it crashes again, I will just leave the images. Yeah, that's it. These are the images.
Maybe in your case, would you like to add are the words description or are they poetic?
No,
Okay,
they are poetic.
would you like to read them to us so we can look at, do you think we should would you like to read them so we see them with the images?
Yeah, can be. Let me put
Or
it in the chat.
image? Yeah.
Just a second. Oh no, wait. What's this image? So yeah, just okay. I'll try a different strategy to read. Just 1 minute. Screen share. I also made a mural board that looks more cartographic. And the text is pasted, you can access it and read it there, but I'll conduct you. Yeah. I am a piece of ceramic pipe burned at more than 550 degrees around 4,610 years ago. I am buried by shifting sand dunes and see other fragments of myself submerged by interdunal wetland that form during good winters, like this March. 20 years ago, when they built a bridge and a road near the mouth of the river that approaches me, some of my pieces were found. Archaeologists came and climbed the dunes that tourists now climb daily to watch the sunset behind the dense and not so distant forest of concrete buildings that have developed towards me. Sabiaguaba is a word from the Tupi-Guarani language that means the feeding ground of thrushes. Sand grains have never been lacking in these 4,600 years. They always arrive and fly towards the river and the mangrove that approaches, although now a new road is challenging this movement from micro to macro topo choreography. Getting lost in time, in the wet interdunal space, I see an offering to the old ones. I feel the smoke passing through me again. We live. That's it.
I think that like in the writing too, you could really feel that you're at the edge of something, like I feel like even the use of like the subject of in the writing and like the imagery, like it just always reflects this like on the edge of water, but there's so much sand and there were so many worlds built in that.
Yeah.
I think what was interesting for me is that just looking at the images, I thought we were going on a journey with you. And I think it's because we saw your feet. But then when the text came in, it was from the perspective of this other subject. And just sort of the assumption I made just from the images was interesting.
I
Yeah,
love
I
the
think, okay. Sorry,
I love
Constance.
I love the complexity of seeing the slideshow first and then seeing the text in the chat and then seeing this map. So like the combination of all the technologies and the voices, it's really stunning.
Yes.
It makes me think of the Umwelt of a pipe,
Mhm.
kind of like mapping, the what a pipe sees, what a pipe perceives.
Yeah.
I noticed the layers and depth of history and perspectives and human and non-human beings, and I'm struck by the richness of this area that you mapped out is available to us anywhere.
Yeah. Think with the text, I tried like to work in the perspective of post-humanism, like after presenting a very subjective experience of this place with the images, the text, I tried to create a contrast with this very subjective perception. And I think this is an exercise of post-humanism, like try to put yourself in the perspective of the modern human or of the things that exist in a different scale of time than we do. So this is a place I always visit. Like I like to go during the weekends. It's like 13 minutes away from my place by car. And it's still in the city where I live, but it's just beside. And people don't go in this area very often. And it's also an archaeological site. So during the last decades, they found ceramics from prehistoric people. And they also found pipe. So this is the inspiration for this point of view. The point of view of this pipe that was used 4,000 years ago, and how like infrastructure development brings these archaeological objects to the surface. And also like this place, it's always different. So I always go there, but I could get lost in it because from March until June, you see these interdunal wetlands, these small lagoons. So I wanted to walk in this wet place that is always different because it's formed by the rain. So it's not the same place that I visited last year when these lagoons were there. It's a different path. So it's a place I always go, but I had the opportunity to get lost in it.
Sorry, everybody,
because
can you hear me?
the environment changed. Yes.
We can hear you. Welcome back, Lauren.
That was weird. That's never happened to me before. That was a very powerful presentation, Rui. Knocked me right off of the infrastructure for communication.
Yes.
Are we ready to give you feedback? Did you get feedback?
Yeah, we had a
Okay.
short discussion.
Well, I'll catch up with everybody. Do we have a chance? I think we only have time for one more, maybe. Izzy, did you want to share one with us as well, or?
I made one. I would be happy to share, but also I don't want to,
I think Harold hasn't gone yet either, and Constance hasn't gone yet. Are people okay if we go over for a half hour? Yeah, it'd be great.
I'm sorry, I can't. I have to leave in 15 minutes.
Okay, well, why don't you go next?
Okay, mine is short. So, and I'm gonna pin my, okay.
It's like a performance map where the bodies has to be involved in the map.
Mm. I love that. And I like the fact that you're moving it all around and sharing us. Are you mapping a dynamic situation like a whirlpool? So something was floating in water and spinning down.
I'm actually mapping the little area where I was, and there was quite a lot of wind, and it felt like things were sometimes.
I think it's a wonderful use of that edge between technology and analog, you know, the idea that you decided to perform your map live for us while you're live while you're actually also on satellite. I think that's a really great way of kind of bringing in that idea of the temporal and the gigantic at the same time. The moment and the infrastructure web that allows us to see something that looks like you just picked it. So did you pick those things this morning?
Yes, I went to the space. Well, I went again to the space to
Yeah.
get the pieces.
So because they look so freshly taken from the landscape.
Yes.
And that's really lovely that you went out and got that for us to see. Is that a fossil? Is there fossilized things in there?
I don't know. It's a rock of some sort that was right there in my sensory exercise.
It's cool. The rock was sort of the narrator,
Mhm.
moving it around, our guide.
Thank you.
Harold, would you like to go?
Sure. Oh, do I have to pin myself? Share, let's see. Share screen. Nope. I shared
Oh.
many screen. Oh yeah, is there something that has to be done? If I click on share screen, I'm not seeing any of.
Wait.
Okay.
Are you not able to share your screen?
I see options of a, oh wait, maybe it's my desktop. I do, but I'm not clear about what I should be showing. It's not, let's see. I have options of different finders. Are those all mine? Just not quite, there's desktop. I don't seem to be able to.
Is it a Zoom problem
think it-
on our side or have,
Yeah, I've shared many screens before.
okay, so I'm wondering whether it's, can somebody else try and share their screen? I just want to make sure it's
Yeah.
not that I just chose new computer to use. Izzy, do you want to try to share screen?
Or should I try to share my map or just
Yeah.
something?
Try-
Okay.
try
Yeah,
and share
an
your-
image would be great, yeah.
Okay, let me try. Let's see. Okay. Or usually I don't, for some reason, I can't even, oh, okay, let's see. Can you see?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
did you have an option of just choosing that image or your desktop?
Yes.
Interesting. Because I don't.
Sorry, mine has writing on it.
That's okay.
Go. Yeah, go for it.
I didn't, maybe I didn't totally follow the directions. I'm gonna be quiet though.
For this one, I feel like the body becomes a site of vibrations, and the map is like a movement of sensations that happen upon the body, but not like upon the body, but like softly upon the body, wet grass, the smell of couch shit, like the sensations, a sensation map.
And a translation of the sensations in from your thought field.
Yeah, it's like a schematic.
And interesting, it reminds me also of Jasmine's map with got a strong directional field going around a center. So like I feel like from the night sky to the clouds, to the wet air, to the ocean waves, to the wind, to the grass inside ears, and wet grass, electrical earth, body exposed to cold, occasional sound, distant traffic. These things are almost looping around the central image that these images feel like, again, our course last week about like from the minuscule to the planetary. This feels like you're doing that kind of thing intuitively about infrastructures of scale and perception when you're getting lost and how you figure out where you are and what you're a part of. I'm definitely feeling that sense of scalability and using all your senses, touch and feeling and touch and yeah, it's also very feeling oriented. The sense of feeling from weather to you know, embodied senses in the body, like feeling of cold and things touching your body. So a sensory map, spatialized sensory map.
It's making me think of experiences as nodes, you know, like instead of it, like it's just kind of helps like expand what a moment can feel like beyond just the body. Like, you know, like it can become like, it can embody so much. I don't know. I didn't know a map could make someone feel something like this.
I'm reminded of the illustration that's supposed to communicate both human culture and our planet and the solar system that was inscribed on the gold disc that went with the Voyager spacecraft. So much is here intertwined and so concisely delivered.
I think for me, the upper part, it makes me think of what it means to get out of the shape of the earth in a way. And I kind of see like two maybe planets and the cycle of day and night. And maybe maybe that's the moon, maybe how it influences all of these writings on the map. and it's very sensory when I can almost hear the space in between electricity and sound. Lots of sounds.
I'm interpreting the top as like the Earth and the Moon, and that number 382,500. I think that's like the distance from the Earth to the Moon. And overall, my impression is that like it looks pretty scientific to me. Just the imagery, and that other drawing near the bottom half looks like kind of like an electromagnetic, you know, it looks like it's trying to depict that. But it's like interesting to juxtapose that with what is written, because a lot of it is like also expressive. Yeah, I don't know.
Should I elaborate?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of you were really spot on. I was in a cow pasture near my house, which is near the ocean, and it was nighttime. So I was relying on a lot of my other senses, like sound, which is why I think the map is so sound heavy. And I was also, because it was nighttime, the longer I was in the pasture and the deeper I walked into it, the more I could see. So like, I also felt my senses expanding with time too. And I kept thinking about like how what I could see was like I was seeing silhouettes of the tree line and of the electrical poles and of the houses. And so I was thinking about the moon in that way and the illumination of the moon. And the stars. Sorry, I'm outside and there's dogs running around. So the sounds. And I was also thinking about the moon being connected to the ocean and how I could hear the waves because of the like connectivity. Sorry, guys. The connectivity between the. I'm gonna move really quickly. The connectivity between the moon and the ocean and sound in that. And also the way it was kind of a surround sound. Sorry, I'm going into a different room because since I'm talking, I'm going into the bathroom. The connectivity between the sound of the ocean and the wind, I couldn't tell. I knew that the ocean was coming from the west, but the way that sound travels and echoes, it felt like it was all around me. So I was feeling things on like a planetary almost level of like being on a rock floating in space, and how that's kind of my like pseudoscience graph that it became, the like weird arrows, and that was the distance from the moon, which is really big distance, but it feels really small sometimes too. And yeah, also the electricity of the earth I kept thinking about because I could see the electrical poles and was feeling like how the earth was like wet and cold, but is like a conduit of energy, and was looking at the stars. And yeah, so yeah, sorry about the chaotic description. Everyone just started screaming at all these puppy dogs, so I had to hide.
Thank you so much for sharing, Izzy. They're beautiful, really, really beautiful work, and spot on the idea of the interplanetary and the embodied. And it's so lovely to see your hand drawings.
Thank you.
Harold, are you able to go?
I'm going to try. I just upgraded.
Okay.
My-
Oh,
let's
nice.
see. Let's see. Does not seem, let's see. Files. For some strange reason, no.
You can try dropping it in the chat and maybe someone else can share it if you have.
Oh,
the
that would be
image.
great, actually. Great
I don't mind
idea.
sharing it.
Thank you. Let's see.
I already have it up, downloaded.
You have what downloaded?
I downloaded your image.
You did?
Pull it up. Is this the one in the chat, right? Or am I wrong?
Oh, no. That was a different here. I'll drop in chat right
okay.
now.
I thought
That
it
was,
was
oh,
that was your
the,
map.
no, that was the illustration of that golden record here.
Oh,
Yeah, somebody could try to,
okay. I'll do that.
thank you so much.
No worries at all. Wait, is this right?
Yeah, that's it.
Seems like a visual diary of your progression through a landscape in different moments in time. But I'm also really intrigued about what's happening up on the top left of the moon.
You're moving through time and landscape. You went surfing, but you got rained out, and then you needed to have a cup of tea to warm up.
I like that it feels both kind of like prehistoric, yet also outdated. Not in a rude way, you know what I mean? Where it's like, it almost feels like it's like made like in like a different time, but it's made now at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense. Where it's like the like the fire, like the clip art fire reminds me of like an older time that is like even like 20 years ago, but also thousands of years ago at the same time. I don't know, like the same routine, but a different like way of putting it.
I'm
Like that-
intrigued. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Yeva, you first.
I was just gonna say I'm intrigued by the three, images in the top left corner, and the fact that there's like the rain cloud there, but there's also the rain cloud at the bottom, and that man in the middle. I feel like I should recognize him, but I don't. I can't name who that is, but I'm thinking maybe those are more of like a mood. While the other icons are telling like a story like the others were saying.
The sort of spatialized elements are interesting in also that they're a kind of gray. And then the icons that are in space are all kind of clearly separate from that gray. They're not like necessarily a part of it, except for the cloud, which is gray. So there's a kind of interesting thing because the image looks like it's a water world, you know, like a lake and tributaries that feed it. So the cloud being gray also makes me think that it's kind of a diagram of a watery world. And so I've got like the watery world, and then I leap to blacks. And it's interesting because the car, the arrow, the storm cloud that's raining, that's black. And then the kind of night sky kind of make me think about like these things that have the capacity to move outside of the map space, like the idea of the top left maybe being ancestors, kind of like things that surround the space, but that aren't like necessarily in it. And then the car as this like metaphysical vehicle, like in Repo Man, like I feel like the car could take off and become an ancestor. Like I'm not, I know that that's not right, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of how I'm reading it, I'm connecting the car with the kind of black lines. And so for me, one of the big mysteries is why is one cloud gray and another cloud black, and why are two different kinds of rain? There's drops and hashes. So I'm kind of fascinated by the kind of language of the complexities of that kind of system. And also, I'm also connecting the reds, like the fire reds and the teapot, as like the manufacturing of things that come from heated things, like in order to make a teapot, maybe even though it makes hot water and it's connected to fire, but maybe it's also a ceramic thing or a metal thing, which are manufactured by fire. So I've also so I guess what I'm saying is that I'm reading color as I'm reading a lot into color here.
I'm reminded of the green screens that they use for weather forecasting. Like I can see someone standing in front and all it's missing is the pineapples from the Pineapple Express. It's interesting how weather, I mean, especially this year, has had a huge impact. But my ex-husband a long time ago, he's not from this country, and he saw the weather map and he was like, this man is like a god, he controls the weather. And with the sort of forefather there, it reminded me of that interaction.
How are we doing, Harold?
Astoundingly, astounding that the perceptions and attunement. And this was so unexpected, not what I intended. And there was sort of a double entendre of lostness. My challenge was I wander a lot. So I've explored, I've gotten lost in all these places and I didn't know what to do. And it was really late last night and I just start driving and I park in a muddy lot and there's an old guy listening to some strange show and drinking a Coors from a can, and I ask him and he says, go to the beach, there's a 2-mile beach. I didn't know about it, I didn't realize. So I started following, and the top left is sort of the atmosphere, it's sort of the weather report. It's literally like dark sliver moon, lots of rain, overcast, moist, and then that's Carl Jung, and that's what it ended up being, is this journey to the underworld, a liminal space, and of coming into contact with archetypes, which is what these represent. So I'm wandering this dark beach. There's really nobody there. And first there's this perfectly formed round, like the walls of a hut without the roof. It definitely lands, and I take that in and I wander further, and then I smell it and see it, and in all the dark, there's this one fire and these three figures sitting silently around, not saying anything, being very present. And that I take that in and I go further, and then there's a surfboard left on the sand, and I'm struck by that, this resource, this valued resource and a native resource of this place. And as I'm walking further, what I take in from that is, oh, this is the island saying, look, if you, there's a piece I forgot. Yes, there's a, it looks like a trunk. Again, it's liminal and shadowy. 390-degree angles of wood, two heavy and one thinner. And so it looks like a meditating, like a yogini, right in the surf line. And so it's sitting upright, legs, everything perfectly 90 degree, and then a wave will come and it falls, and then it gets sucked back up and again falls again and sucked back up and thumping, but always just like this human form, but completely in tune and surrendering to the literal rhythms and the vibrations of the planet, just going with what's being conveyed and delivered. And so what I saw was this, both Earth, the planet, and this place, this island where I am inhabiting now, will offer all of the fundamental needs. Shelter will be provided, warmth and a place of connection and a way of cooking. The oldest technology will be provided. Like physical resources are abundant. They are literally laying on the beach here. All I have to do is just take in the messages and surrender and just feel it in. And then finally, so then I'm wandering back on a different liminal path, and it starts pouring rain, and I'm wearing cotton and linen and flax. And so I start scurrying, looking for shelter. And there's a bungalow, the first bungalow, with an overhang. And so I run over, and as I'm going up the steps, there's a pink sign and it says something like House of Artisans. And as I'm going up the steps, I look and I go, wow, there's a teapot there. And as I get closer to the glass, there's a whole wall of teapots, and not ordinary things, like really fine clay teapots. And over there are all these displays of tea cakes, the traditional way of compressing, storing, and transporting tea from China to Tibet and other ways. And I've stumbled upon a tea shop that's called, and get this, this is called, what's it called? Oh, I gotta exit, give me 1 second. 1 second. It's called, I have to exit out of this. There we go. It's called, so there's a sign, Wu Wei, which is a Taoist term, which means, it comes from 4th, 3rd century BCE philosophers in early Taoism, the practice of taking no action that is not in accord with the natural course of the universe. And a quote from the Tao Te Ching, the Tao does nothing, yet nothing remains unaccomplished. And so I look it up when I get home. It's called the Wu Wei Tea Lab. And it's literally, the founders have 2 of these in Bali and 1 just established in Kauai. And their website informs creating spaces, styles, and movements for a growing wisdom age, for varied cultural heritages to gather and collaborate harmoniously and most effectively. And we are actively expanding on the wings of a new wave in human perspective and decolonizing our sense of place, keeping with the active pulse of our future generations. We are in service to a higher intelligence, nature. So literally, I've stumbled upon or been led to a network of global tea spaces. So there you go.
Amazing.
What an incredible story.
Oh.
you know, we have, that's a perfect way to kind of, I think, end our session this week with the idea of Wu Wei. The
Mm.
Taoist concept of doing nothing, and yet nothing is lost by that not doing, right? Is a fundamental kind of way of being able to approach a radical transformation of the idea of other than human beings and the inheritance of the world and the complex entanglements that we live amidst. This like hyperdrive idea in the West of constantly needing to prove our effectiveness in the world, to prove our worthiness for jobs, for employment, for creativity, for creative voice, is so rooted in a kind of Western concept of meaning and epistemological meaning that Wu Wei is like fundamentally opposite of that. In the doing of nothing is the incorporation of all that is. And it's not the same as slacking off. I think it really encapsulates what I would have attempted to do in my missing lecture for today, which I will start with next week, which is that I put together a lecture of some small selection of 5 or 6 contemporary artists who use mapping to talk about post-human infrastructure. So we'll start our class next week with the lecture that I would have given this week, which is a really good thing, because I would like to share a story about getting lost with you and how challenging it was for me to get to class today, because I've been in a state of recuperation from like nearly dying at sea a couple of, like, what is today? Thursday? So Tuesday. So I went out to look at a site on the Salton Sea with which is a terminal sea, an accidental consequence of a break in the Colorado River infrastructure, which is now an evaporating landscape. And I went out to look at what was a platform built during the Cold War for practicing nuclear bombing in the middle of the Salton Sea. And I went out there with 2 friends on a like origami collapsible boat with an electrical motor under the most still, calm sea conditions. And it's 2 miles out in a sea that's largely dead. There's nothing that's surviving in there. So there was an unearthly silence and colors that are so spectral because it's all light on glass at sunset. And it's already getting hot out there. And there was absolutely stillness and a sense of like having left your body, like in an Egyptian kind of boat moving from the unknown into the known, because it's not like any place living I've ever kind of been. And when we got to this platform, we went up to explore it. And as we started to explore it, we saw one flight of birds cross, all black, I think might have been cormorants out of nowhere. And after they passed by in a V formation, all of a sudden this crazy wind just came out of nowhere, just like that. And all of a sudden, 2 miles out, we were surrounded by whitecaps. And there was absolutely no warning of this. And we went back to the boat and we got in and we waited too long. It got to be darkness. And the only thing we could navigate by was a beeping light in the distance. And all of that toxic water was all over us. We were literally drenched with the stinging, saltiest water you can imagine. And we only had one dot left on our electric motor. And one of my friends who hasn't rowed in years started rowing, and all we went was nowhere. And then Jamie Grace, who's also in this class, started singing Amazing Grace, which is a song about death and dying. And so I thought, oh my God, this is like so surreal. So this is how it ends in the Salton Sea, in the world going from day to night. And I called a friend on the shore. Oh, and also we were in a place where they built nuclear bombs, a ruin of a place they built nuclear bombs, where all over the place it says, you might be stepping on on something that can detonate. So it was like maximum fear. Anyway, we took 2 hours, but we got back to shore. And but the experience of going from absolute stillness and beauty, but almost a deathly kind of thing, to seeing something change all of a sudden and becoming, really treacherous, was such an experience of like getting lost. Like if I had that like experience of getting lost, but also this embodied experience of being in a boat with 3 people. And we were all going through the same thing in that moment of time together for 2 hours, where all of our body movements were about survival and collectivity. Like it was such a tiny little boat that Christian in rowing needed me to figure out how not to hit his back. And I had to lean back far enough that the white caps coming in wouldn't sink us. So I was bailing water out, but like in this strange position of trying to balance the boat. And Jamie Grace was trying to run the engine at 30 degrees towards the waves. And it was crazy. So I had to figure out how to write my lecture last night for today, which was so much a part of this after driving home and, dealing with just all of that. So Alex helped me until the middle of the night last night, put together this like images for you all that we didn't even need today. So I apologize, but I'm so thankful, Alex, because we got some wonderful stuff to share next week, but also, just to talk about in all of our maps, this multi-layered experience, right? That is this embodied experience that I wanted to begin the part of our class where we'll talk about projects, right? Is that it's just sometimes it's almost too easy, just like it's almost too easy to turn on the lights or turn on the taps and get water. It's almost too easy to pull down a map from Google Earth. It's so easy that it almost stops having meaning in our embodied experience of the stories we're trying to tell. So I really wanted to start this by, challenging us to get out into the world and make these maps and find out how well we can actually interpret each other's maps without the clarity of the contemporary, the ease at which you can share your map with anyone. And also how much information we already have about the world. Even in this provisional exercise of getting lost, I feel like we all know so much about the world that none of us were left without words about each other's projects. So I think that's a really, really interesting way to begin. And I do apologize that we've gone so far over the end of class today, but there was no way to shorten this past where it was. And I thank you all who have been able to stay for sticking in there. And I'm glad that I gave the assignment this week of getting lost, because I thought, well, I definitely got lost in an unfamiliar place, and understood the hubris. I've had 2 life-threatening experiences in the last 7 years. One was getting bit by a rattlesnake, and the other one was being lost at sea in the wrong boat at the wrong time. And both come down to this overconfidence. That is, I think, part of being in the modern condition, at least for me, which is, I've just believed in that beautiful day being good enough, because but I was in a place that I don't really know. And things can change. And unless you really know and are prepared for how they can change, you're not thinking with all your senses about like what the world has to tell you. So it's really interesting to think about building these speculative ecologies, because what we're building them for is the precarity of the moment we live in, right? We need all of our senses around us. We need to use technology. We need to use sensuality. We need to use taste and feeling and touch within all of this in order to navigate and communicate in really important and impactful ways. Well, thank you for listening. I guess that's my lecture this week, is getting lost as a pedagogical experience of community building. And also trust how much you know and can share, and know that you're using technology to share it. We experienced everything here today, from maps and collage to video and sound to watercolor and drawing to measure drawings and cross hatches and symbols. There was a lot of technique and practice, and yet a huge diversity of mapping. So thank you for a wonderful class, and be well and safe, and we will pick up again next week.